Week 1 is in the books, so let's dive into some players that I'm looking to trade for already after the first week of the season. Starting with 4 kind of mediocre performances from rookies in terms of the box score and fantasy points, but the underlying signals are phenomenal right now out of the gate. We'll start first with Omarion Hampton from the Friday night game in Brazil. For some reason, I saw a lot of people really down on his performance because he wasn't efficient, he didn't score a touchdown, and he wasn't used much in the passing game. He finished the night with 3.2 yards per carry, tied for 4th on the team in targets, and 8 PPR points as a fringe top 30 fantasy running back. On the surface, it was an underwhelming night, but if you look at this game from a more glass half full perspective, you'd see a lot of tremendous signs moving forward. He had 17 total touches, 15 carries, and 2 receptions compared to Najee Harris's 1 carry and 1 reception. In terms of backfield dominance as a rookie in his first ever NFL game, it really doesn't get any better than that, and I don't see how they give Najee more work if they've already started out this far with the rookie. Only 5 running backs actually had a higher snap percentage than Omarion Hampton, who played on 80% of snaps this week, and only 8 running backs ran more routes than Omarion Hampton. Even though he was only targeted on 2 of those routes, he was still out there running a ton of routes. And finally, the Chiefs' run defense is really, really good. They are actually the hardest team to play against for running backs for fantasy last year, and were one of 3 teams to allow fewer than 70 rushing yards per game to running backs in 2024. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Chris Jones is really, really good. When I went back to watch Hampton's runs, pretty much all of his runs that were stopped at the line of scrimmage were because Chris Jones just blew up the play. But when they ran away from Chris Jones or they contained him between the tackles, that's where Hampton had his 11-yard rush, his 2 8-yard runs, his 7-yard run, the bigger plays where he was able to get through the defensive line and actually start sprinting into the secondary, and he looked really, really good on those plays. So if this volume is the volume that Hampton is going to get every single week, good things are going to come eventually. I mean, they still have to play Vegas twice, the Giants, the Dolphins, the Colts, the Titans, Jaguars, Steelers, Cowboys, and the Houston Texans. That is a crazy soft schedule for not only the LA Chargers, but for specifically Omarion Hampton. If the person in your league is concerned already after drafting him in the first 3 or 4 rounds of your drafts, try to sell him a James Conner, an Alvin Kamara, a Kenneth Walker. Maybe you can capitalize on very good week 1 performances from guys like Javonte Williams or Travis Etienne or Jalen Warren, plus something to get up to Omarion Hampton, or sell high on Tony Pollard before Tyjae Spears comes back. He's not an immediate buy immediately after week 1, but this is something that you could begin working on now to coax away a high upside rookie who has wonderful volume on a great offense without the production behind it yet. Similarly, TreVeyon Henderson is another great player to try to buy right now because of his underlying metrics as well. He didn't play all that much in week 1, only 35% of the snaps compared to Ramondre Stevenson's 65%, and he only had 5 carries, but where he's already excelling in meaningful games already that should tip volume more his way is, of course, his efficiency and his receiving work. He had over 5 yards per carry on his 5 carries, and he also totaled 6 receptions. Not to mention, Ramondre Stevenson only averaged 2.1 yards per carry, so there's no way that New England continues running a 65-35 split in Ramondre Stevenson's favor as the season continues to go on. It could honestly be 50-50 by the end of the month, and then even 65-35 in Henderson's favor by November. And the best time to get in on this is right now. Pretty much all the names that I just mentioned to sell for Omarion Hampton, I would also sell for TreVeyon Henderson. Now moving to the wide receiver position, still in this rookie class with mediocre week 1 performances, I was absolutely enthralled by Tet McMillan's usage this week. He had a team high 9 targets with 5 receptions for 68 yards, and his day could have been a lot better had he hauled in a 30-yard touchdown that was slightly off target but 100% catchable. He tried to one-hand it and just couldn't bring it in. Plus, they had another play that Tet beat his defender on deep, and Bryce then got hit as he threw by a corner blitz coming off the edge. That could have also been another 40-yard touchdown. Had he caught one of those passes, we're talking about Tet McMillan in a wildly different way right now after his first NFL game. Had he caught both, we'd probably be punching his ticket to Canton right now on social media. But because we didn't get either big play touchdown, and the box score readers would just see 5 for 68, which is like 11 PPR points in fantasy, which is a good day, but it's nothing really incredibly special, they might not know just how good Tet McMillan really looked and how dialed into him Bryce Young actually was. This is everything that we wanted to see out of the gate. A high target share, a high air yard share. Everything was there for Tet McMillan. And I know it is the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, but their schedule is not hard at all, especially when their fantasy playoff schedule is New Orleans in the Dome, Tampa Bay at home, then Seattle at home. My preseason take was that Tet McMillan is this year's Brian Thomas Jr., and everything that I saw on Sunday just continues to reinforce that take, and things will only get better. I would flip Tyreek Hill for Tet McMillan right now, or sell Jalen Waddle plus, Chris Olave plus, take advantage of big week ones from Hollywood Brown or Quentin Johnston or Keenan Allen, and move up to Tet McMillan, who is a solid fantasy wide receiver too right now, but with a true ceiling of a top 5 difference maker by the end of the season. Now, in the same game, I also loved what I saw from Travis Hunter, who played over 60% of snaps on offense to only 9% of snaps on defense, which we love to see for fantasy football, and hopefully he gets even more snaps offensively as the season goes on. But he saw 8 targets on 60% of snaps, and a near 30% targets per route run rate is absolutely incredible. That was actually 11th highest among all wide receivers who ran at least 20 routes this week prior to the Monday night game. He also saw 1 more target than Brian Thomas Jr., who had a very massively disappointing game for fantasy, but I mostly blame Trevor Lawrence for that. But at least for Travis Hunter, he saw easy screen passes, quick slant routes, easy stuff to get him going and get the ball in his hands in space. But he also had some downfield usage that had Trevor Lawrence thrown a better ball that wasn't going to be picked off by J.C. Horn, Hunter would have had a massive 50-plus yard play tacked onto his end of game total. Essentially, everything from Travis Hunter this week was extremely positive, except the final fantasy point number of 9.3 PPR points. So because of that, I do wonder if people would be willing to trade him because he wasn't drafted crazy high to where they probably would have other depth pieces that outproduced him this week. And you can come in, swoop him, grab him for the ultimate ceiling that he possesses for the entire season. I'm trying to look for ways to move Quentin Johnston, Jaden Reed, Stephon Diggs, Hollywood Brown, maybe even Calvin Austin as the wide receiver 2 for Aaron Rodgers now. Add something small to guys like that for Travis Hunter and see if you get a bite. Now, onto some big performers from week 1 that I think signal big things coming this season that I want to get in on the train now before it's too late. The first is actually Michael Pittman, who finished as a top 12 guy on the week with 20 PPR fantasy points, hauling in 6 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown on 8 targets. Now, I have a few takeaways from this entire Colts-Dolphins game overall. Number 1, Miami's offense really sucks, and I'm terrified for everybody involved. Number 2, Daniel Jones low-key looks pretty good and could be this year's Sam Darnold. Then number 3, if Daniel Jones is actually kind of good, Michael Pittman could be the main wide receiver 1, helping him also get there over Josh Downs. Downs continued to be relegated to only 3 wide receiver sets, with Michael Pittman and then a combination of either Alec Pierce or Adonai Mitchell playing on the outside in 2 wide receiver sets, and then of course Tyler Warren at tight end. It's basically a knockoff version of the Packers offense, except the Colts version of Romeo Doubs is actually a pretty good wide receiver with multiple 1,000-yard seasons under his belt. It is not out of the range of possibilities for this Colts offense to surprise for fantasy football. Like I said, with Daniel Jones as this year's Sam Darnold, and then Michael Pittman as this year's Terry McLaurin or DJ Moore, an older veteran with solid production before, but now is in a somewhat newer situation who then pops in year 6. I mean, from 2021 to 2023, Michael Pittman was a top 20 fantasy wide receiver 3 years in a row in not so great of situations, playing with Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Gardner Minshew, and Anthony Richardson. Then last year, he played through this crazy back injury that was a lower back fracture that he actually ended up having surgery on after the season ended. The fact that he played through a fractured back in the NFL is absolutely insane, but it also explains why his numbers were lower last year compared to 2021, 2022, and 2023. So now fully healthy, playing all the snaps offensively in both 2 and 3 wide receiver sets, possibly with a quarterback upgrade or at least a better quarterback than what he's had for a couple of the past few years. Why can't Michael Pittman return to top 20 fantasy production or even borderline wide receiver 1 production like he had in 2023 with over 100 receptions for 1,100 yards? Maybe the ultimate ceiling isn't there like it is for a few other, deeper kind of names in Michael Pittman's draft range, but a consistent weekly option is still valuable as a cheap wide receiver 2 or flex option that you can then use other pieces of your roster to upgrade somewhere else. For a player that we all kicked to the curb in drafts this year, whoever drafted him probably didn't care all that much that they drafted him, and they probably still really don't. So you can buy him fairly cheap for that depth running back or some flashier wide receiver who did well this week, but maybe that doesn't hold up all year for those specific players. I just think that Michael Pittman is a little bit too cheap to try to buy right now, just to see if this week 1 Colts performance isn't actually a fluke, but actually indicative of a much better year-long thing. The other big performer on the week that I want to buy into right now is Keon Coleman. A lot of people really love Keon Coleman as a double-digit flyer pick in drafts this year, especially John Paulson, and congratulations if that was you and you drafted Keon Coleman late in your drafts. I was still a little bit skeptical, but after Sunday night, man, I am no longer skeptical. I think that he could be the real deal in the NFL for Josh Allen's wide receiver 1. 8 receptions, 112 yards, and 1 touchdown on 11 targets. And sure, it definitely helped that Buffalo had to throw more this week against Baltimore, but did you see how bad Buffalo's defense was? I mean, I get it's Baltimore, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry can do that to basically anyone, but man, they looked really bad, which sucks for Buffalo, but is great for us for fantasy because if they're constantly in high-scoring games, then everyone involved should be good for fantasy offensively. It's the Bengals defense, the Lions defense, the Cowboys defense effect that if you're giving up that many points and your offense has to score more, give me pieces of that offense, especially when they're tied to Josh Allen. And it's not like Keon Coleman had a random game that we've never seen before from him. He did flash last year as a rookie. From weeks 4 through 8, Coleman was on pace for 55 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns before getting hurt in week 9, then missing 4 games that by the time he came back, he just never got reintegrated into the Bills' offense. They had traded for Amari Cooper, they had Curtis Samuel, they had Matt Collins, and James Cook just rushed for like 2 to 3 touchdowns every other week. But now, entering year 2 and healthy with less target competition around him, Coleman thrived on Sunday night and was Josh Allen's go-to guy in many different situations, plus also had a shoestring tackle at the end of the game at the 9-yard line that could have been his second touchdown of the night and put him over 30 fantasy points as the wide receiver 1 on the week. The Bills still have games against the Dolphins twice, the Patriots twice, the Saints, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Bucks, the Texans, Bengals, Steelers, Browns, and Chiefs, which is all a mixed bag of either really bad defenses that Coleman can take advantage of and or potentially high-scoring games that could try to replicate the magic of that Sunday night game against the Ravens, all of which are very good for Keon Coleman. So I am in. I am fully in on Keon Coleman as the wide receiver 1 for Buffalo and Josh Allen, and I would trade what looks to be an overpay right now, but may not end up actually being in a month. I'm talking trade Jerry Jeudy for Keon Coleman, Calvin Ridley for Keon Coleman, trade Jalen Waddle right now for Keon Coleman. And if you get anything on top of Coleman in those deals, that is fantastic. If you can pivot away from guys like Jaden Reed, Stephon Diggs, Khalil Shakir, Cedric Tillman, Matthew Golden, or Hollywood Brown, I would do that instantly to get Keon Coleman. I would also consider actually trading down from guys like Devontae Adams, George Pickens, Jameson Williams, Tyreek Hill, and Terry McLaurin for Keon Coleman plus. I do need a plus with them given where you drafted them versus Keon Coleman and for their name values and expectations as well. I don't need a plus with Jeudy, Ridley, or Waddle, but I do for these bigger names that you drafted in the first 4-ish rounds. But I would be looking to make deals like that for any sort for Keon Coleman. Finally, I would just add that it might be possible to trade for some elite round 1 or round 2 talents who had really bad weeks. I'm talking Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., and yes, even A.J. Brown. I don't think anyone's actually selling these guys off of bad games, but it is week 1, and people get really weird about week 1 and starting 0-1 on the year in their fantasy leagues. That weird deals can happen. Remember, a buy window for elite players like this does not mean that you get a discount on them from where they drafted them. It just means that whoever has them might actually be willing to listen to trade offers just more than usual, and they might actually be available to buy. I would not expect any sort of discount whatsoever if you are trading for names like this, but if you missed on these guys in the draft and you still want them, which you should still want these guys even after bad week 1s, then try to make a move for them in a bigger trade that maybe plays on their biases or overreactions to other players in week 1, like 2-for-1s or 3-for-1s or 2-for-2s, 3-for-2s, stuff like that. Bigger deals to where you can pivot off of whoever your round 1 or round 2 pick was and try to see if you can get a better player that you may have actually wanted in your fantasy drafts that wasn't there whenever you were up. But if you're looking for some other big names to buy or moves to make in general after week 1, I would highly recommend checking out Kayla's video from earlier this week, which you guys can find right up here.